The heavy metal groan of the spaceship reverberated through the grand hall of the Galactic Culinary and Biological Institute. The enormous structure, perched on a ridge overlooking an alien forest, stretched for miles across the horizon. Its walls shimmered with an iridescent glow, a tribute to the advanced species that had shaped this institute into a hub of knowledge and research. Today, however, the Grand Hall was bustling not with quiet scholars or sterile equipment, but with flashing cameras and a tense, vibrant energy. The far-reaching corridors echoed with the footsteps of delegates from across the stars, all gathering for an unprecedented event. Trevor Langford, a human student with wild hair and a slight build, found himself among the sea of alien faces. His presence was an anomaly, a lone human in a sea of highly evolved beings who had traveled light years to gather and discuss their fields of study. He had the distinct privilege, or curse, depending on how you saw it, of being the only human allowed at this year's Galactic Culinary Symposium. He wasn't supposed to be here. Not really. Human culinary history wasn't even considered noteworthy by most galactic standards. Earth's cuisine, with its messy origins of war recipes and survival foods, was laughed at by other species. But then, something had changed. Something strange about Earth's food had piqued the interest of alien societies, and they had begun to view humanity's culinary traditions not as primitive, but as an unexplored field of gastronomic rebellion. Standing at the back of the massive auditorium, Trevor crossed his arms and took a deep breath. His eyes scanned the room as he tried to calm his nerves. It was a cacophony of voices in various languages, with delegates speaking in tones of excitement, curiosity, and skepticism. Some looked at him with intrigue, others with disdain, as if he were nothing more than a misplaced student in a room of elite scholars. His focus shifted to the stage at the front. The doors had just opened, and a delegation from the Ration University, one of the most prestigious institutions in the galaxy, was making its entrance. Their leader, Trilok, glided into the room with an aura of grace and arrogance. He was tall and lithe, his translucent body almost shimmering in the dim light. His head was crowned with long, gossamer fronds that seemed to sway with the faintest breeze, and his eyes were large, black orbs set deep into his skull. Trilok was a xenobiologist and an expert in biochemical evolution, a being who had mastered the study of food and its relationship to life. He was the very embodiment of alien intelligence, and his reputation preceded him. The air in the auditorium seemed to change as he stepped forward, a quiet hum of anticipation passing through the room. Trevor could feel the weight of it. This was no ordinary meeting. Today, they would witness something that could alter the course of galactic history. "Welcome, delegates," Trilok's voice rang out, amplified through the translator devices. "Today, we stand at the crossroads of culinary evolution. As we engage with the culinary legacy of this primitive species, let us open our minds and our stomachs." The audience settled into a thick silence, their eyes trained on the stage. Trilok's voice grew colder, more calculating, as he continued. "Let us discuss why Earth's food, in its quaint and crude form, has no place in the civilized galaxy." The words stung Trevor, but it was the truth. Human food had always been seen as nothing more than a chaotic mix of survival, improvisation, and basic sustenance. The Ration University's members were known to be meticulous, calculating beings, creatures who saw food as a purely biochemical experience, carefully engineered to provide exact, measurable nutritional values. "The human obsession with heat, flavor, and spice," Trilok went on, "has no place in a culture that values efficiency and harmony. Humans, it seems, enjoy pain. Your spices, especially your Carolina Reaper chili, are designed not to nourish, but to torture your very biology." A few gasps erupted from the human side of the room. Trevor stood still, heart pounding in his chest. He knew Trilok's words were a provocation, a challenge, but it felt like a slap in the face. The aliens in the room began murmuring amongst themselves, some nodding in agreement, others seemingly taken aback. Trilok smiled faintly as he glanced toward the human delegation. "I will demonstrate the biochemical power of the Ration species. Watch, as we surpass this primitive addiction to spice and show you true culinary sophistication." He gestured to the side of the stage, and two assistants brought forward a tray, which was covered with a glass dome. When it was removed, the audience was met with the sight of a single, deep-red Carolina Reaper chili, sitting on a golden plate. Trevor's stomach twisted. This was no ordinary chili. It was a symbol of human culinary defiance, a food that had gained infamy across the galaxy for its lethal potency. No one in the room had ever seen one up close, let alone eaten it. Yet here it was, the most potent of Earth's food weapons, brought before the galaxy's most powerful scholars. Trylock lifted the chili with his delicate, translucent fingers, holding it up for the audience to see. "This," he said coldly, "is the peak of human arrogance. We shall see if it can withstand the might of a ration biochemist." A murmur rippled through the room as Trylock brought the chili to his mouth, his fronds swaying gently. There was a pause, one that felt like an eternity, before he took a single, deliberate bite. The room held its breath. Silence fell over the auditorium, thick and suffocating. All eyes were on Trylock as he chewed the Carolina Reaper, his delicate mouth working slowly. Trevor could hear his heart pounding in his ears, every second dragging out like an eternity. The alien's fronds twitched in subtle movements, but his face remained eerily composed. Then, after what felt like a lifetime, Trylock's posture stiffened. His limbs, long and fluid like an insect, jerked once, an involuntary movement, sharp and alien. His expression flickered just for a moment as the capsaicin, the fiery compound in the chili, began to spread through his system. The calm facade he had maintained shattered, replaced by something more primal. The first signs of distress were subtle. His fronds, once floating gently around his head, started vibrating at an unnerving frequency. His eyes, which had been cold and analytical moments before, now bulged, the black depths filled with something else. Fear, pain, something raw and uncontrollable. He took a shallow breath, then another, and his body began to tremble. His fingers tightened around the chili's stem, and his chest heaved as his body fought the burn. The audience, initially still, began to stir. Murmurs grew louder, and even some of the neutral delegates shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Trevor's stomach twisted into knots as he watched Trylock's every movement, his throat dry, heart racing. This was no longer a controlled demonstration. It had crossed into something far more dangerous. Trylock tried to speak, but the words caught in his throat. His face flushed a deep violet, an alien color that seemed almost unnatural. His breathing grew shallow, erratic, as if his body could no longer keep up with the intensity of the spice that was overtaking him. "Is he?" Trevor whispered, glancing at Lena, his lab partner, who was wide-eyed, her hand clasped tightly around the edge of the table. "He's not okay," Lena replied, her voice barely a whisper, a mixture of awe and concern. "Humans are adapted to this heat, but aliens, they aren't. He's overdosing on capsaicin." The moment Trylock collapsed, the room erupted into chaos. His body jerked, and he fell to the floor with an unceremonious thud. The crowd gasped collectively, but no one moved. They all watched in stunned silence as the first signs of neurological shock began to take hold. His skin, normally pale, almost translucent, began to turn a vivid shade of purple, veins bulging under his skin in a strange, alien pattern. His breathing came in erratic, shallow gasps. A high-pitched sound escaped him, something between a growl and a hiss, as he convulsed on the floor. The medics in the back of the room scrambled forward, their movements a blur. They knelt beside Trylock, desperately trying to assess the situation, but the alien's body had already begun to reject the foreign spice at a cellular level. His limbs shook uncontrollably, his body twisting in unnatural angles as though it were trying to escape the heat that was consuming it from within. Trylock's translator device sputtered, briefly picking up his words as he choked on a strangled cry. "Poison, biochemical assault, fire." Trevor's mind raced. He had seen people struggle with the heat of a Carolina Reaper before, but never like this. This wasn't a mere spice burn. It was something far worse. It was as if Trylock's biology couldn't even recognize the compound, let alone handle it. The chili was attacking him at a molecular level, sending his nervous system into overdrive, triggering what seemed like an all-out biochemical warfare. One of the medics, a large, reptilian alien with a sleek exoskeleton, pulled out a small injector from his belt. He pressed it against Trylock's neck, injecting a sedative to calm the spasms. But it wasn't enough. The alien system was too sensitive, too different from human biology, and nothing could reverse the damage done. "Trylock," Trevor called out, his voice louder than the growing panic around him. His gut churned with guilt and fear. This was his fault. If he hadn't been so determined to prove human food wasn't primitive, none of this would have happened. The alien diplomat from the ration delegation stood up, his multifaceted eyes wide with terror. He rushed to the stage, barking orders in an alien language that Trevor couldn't understand. He, too, was grasping at straws, desperate for any solution. But as the minutes ticked by, it became painfully clear that Trylock was slipping away. "We have to help him," Trevor shouted to the medics. His hands were shaking, his face pale. He couldn't watch a being, no matter how arrogant, die like this. There had to be something they could do. One of the human medics, Dr. Ellison, rushed up to the stage, her face grim. She leaned over Trylock's convulsing body, her voice low and steady as she assessed his condition. "We need to get him into a stasis pod. Now." But the stasis pod was in the medical wing, and the nearest emergency transport was still several minutes away. The delay was too much. Time was running out. Trylock's fronds began to twitch violently, his body racked with more convulsions. His breathing ceased entirely for a long, agonizing second before it started up again, ragged and uneven. His limbs were losing their rigidity, his entire body slipping into a state of neurological shock. And then, just when it seemed like the alien would pass out, or worse, his eyes flicked open, if only briefly. In a hoarse, barely audible voice, he muttered a single word. "Fascinating." Then his body went still. The room stood still, a suffocating silence settling like a heavy curtain over the auditorium. The once vibrant energy had evaporated, leaving only the sound of frantic medical equipment and the muffled whispers of confused delegates. Trylock's body lay motionless on the stage, a stark contrast to his previous display of arrogance and intellect. His alien form, now limp and vulnerable, seemed almost out of place among the human and alien witnesses. For the first time, Trevor saw him not as the proud, dismissive scholar, but as a creature in dire need of help, someone who had underestimated the very thing they had come to study. The medics worked quickly, their hands steady despite the growing uncertainty of the situation. Dr. Ellison, a seasoned human physician, was already coordinating a team to prepare for Trylock's transport to the medical wing. Her voice, although calm, carried a sharpness that matched the urgency of the moment. "We need a stasis pod ready now," Dr. Ellison ordered, her gaze never leaving the unconscious form of the ration delegate. "Someone get the neural stabilizers." The assistants scrambled, their movements swift and practiced. They knew what had to be done, but there was an underlying tension in the air. This wasn't just a medical emergency. This was a political catastrophe in the making. As Trylock's body was carefully lifted from the stage, Trevor felt the weight of the situation crash down on him. He had wanted to prove humanity's resilience, to show that humans weren't primitive, that their food could be both a survival mechanism and a cultural symbol. But now, instead of showcasing Earth's culinary ingenuity, he had witnessed the catastrophic failure of an alien system to understand something as simple as spice. His chest tightened. This wasn't how it was supposed to go. He couldn't stand still, not anymore. Trevor pushed his way through the crowd, his mind racing. He needed to speak to someone. He needed answers. He caught Lena's eye as she moved toward the exit, her expression unreadable. She seemed as conflicted as he felt, but there was one thing they both knew. They were in uncharted territory now. Trylock's collapse wasn't just an unfortunate accident. It was a monumental event that would ripple through the galactic community. "Lena, wait up," Trevor called out, his voice shaking slightly. Lena turned, her face pale. "What the hell just happened, Trevor?" she asked, her voice tight with disbelief. This was supposed to be an academic demonstration, not a death sentence. "I don't know," Trevor admitted, running a hand through his hair. I thought Trylock was being dramatic, but this is beyond anything I could have imagined." Lena shook her head. "This is bad, really bad. You know what they'll say. Humans are reckless, barbaric, and we don't understand our own food. You've just handed them a perfect reason to throw us out of the symposium. We'll never be taken seriously now." "I didn't mean for this to happen," Trevor muttered, his fists clenched in frustration. "I thought he'd handle it. He was so sure, so damn sure he could handle it." "Why wouldn't he?" Lena asked bitterly. "He's a xenobiologist. He thought he was invincible, but now he's in a coma and we're all caught in the crossfire." "Right, and we're just going to let that happen." Trevor's voice grew more urgent. "I can't just stand by and do nothing. There has to be a way to fix this, Lena." Lena sighed, her expression softening slightly. "You're a good person, Trevor, but this is too big, too much. The board will spin this against us and they'll use Trylock's collapse to prove their point. We're not even supposed to be here. Do you really think they'll let us stay after this?" Trevor's mind raced as he glanced toward the exit. Trylock was being rushed out, and the hum of the medical equipment blended with the low murmur of the crowd. The ration delegates were beginning to gather, whispering urgently amongst themselves. The tension in the air was palpable, and Trevor could sense the growing animosity. "I don't care what they think," he said, his voice steady. "I'm going to fix this. I'm going to help him no matter what it takes." Lena looked at him with a mix of admiration and concern. "You're crazy, you know that, right?" "Crazy enough to make this right." The medical wing of the Galactic Culinary and Biological Institute was a cold, sterile environment. The walls gleamed with polished chrome and glass, and the air smelled faintly of antiseptic. Trevor had been here before, on routine checkups for human culinary students, but this time everything felt different. Trylock wasn't just another patient. He was a living, breathing symbol of galactic superiority, now brought low by an ingredient Earth had perfected over centuries. Trylock's form lay in a transparent stasis pod, his body suspended in a half-conscious state. The neural dampeners were keeping his mind from shutting down completely, but his vital signs were still unstable. Trevor stood in front of the pod, his reflection staring back at him from the glass. He could see the traces of desperation in his own eyes. "You're not alone, Trylock," he whispered. "I'll fix this. I won't let you be the scapegoat for everything Earth's food represents." A sudden voice interrupted his thoughts. "Trevor Langford," came the deep, guttural voice of a ration delegate. "I need to speak with you." Trevor turned, his heart sinking as he recognized the alien, the very one who had stood beside Trylock earlier. The ration delegate was tall, with sharp features, and his skin shimmered with the same translucent, shimmering quality that made Trylock look so otherworldly. "Are you here to blame me?" Trevor asked, his voice low, tinged with frustration. "If so, you can leave now." The ration delegate's eyes narrowed. "No, I am here to warn you. The Council is furious. You humans have done something to our delegate and you will face consequences. However," he paused, clearly searching for the right words, "I believe you understand the situation better than most." Trevor's heart skipped a beat. "You're not here to punish me?" he asked, his voice cautious. "No," the ration delegate replied, his voice cold but tinged with something else, an understanding. "But you must act fast, Langford. Trylock's situation could change the balance of the entire symposium, and our species is not known for our patience when it comes to failure. If you wish to salvage this, if you wish to stop the disaster you've triggered, you must do it quickly. Time is running out." The ration delegate's words lingered in Trevor's mind like a dark shadow, trailing him as he left the sterile medical wing. Time was running out. He had no idea what kind of leverage he had to fix this, but one thing was clear. He couldn't back down. Not now. Not when everything was hanging by a thread. The news of Trylock's collapse spread fast. By the time Trevor returned to the main building, a crowd of murmuring students and delegates had gathered near the large windows overlooking the sprawling alien forest outside. The diplomatic corps had already begun their quiet, behind-the-scenes work. Their whispers of culinary barbarism and irresponsibility were enough to make the hair on the back of Trevor's neck stand up. He walked past the crowd, his shoulders tight with tension. It wasn't just the symposium he had to worry about. It was humanity's place in the galaxy. His rash move had put Earth's entire reputation on the line. If the Council declared humans to be too reckless to participate in intergalactic cooperation, it would mark the end of any hopes for future collaboration. The thought made his stomach churn. Lena caught up with him in the hallway, her expression unreadable. "What's going on?" she asked, her voice laced with concern. "They're calling for a full investigation into Trylock's incident. The Council is already considering expelling us from the symposium." "I'm going to fix this," Trevor said firmly, though his mind was still spinning with the magnitude of what had happened. "We have to help Trylock, Lena. We have to show them that we're not the reckless species they think we are." Lena stopped in her tracks, her eyes wide. "Trevor, you're talking about saving his life, not just your reputation. This is bigger than any of us." "I know," he admitted, running a hand through his hair. "But I'm not letting this be the reason they shut us out. I can't." She gave him a long, searching look before nodding, as if coming to some silent decision. "Fine, but you need help. I'll help you, but we have to do this right." Two of them made their way to the central data bank, a massive, towering structure where scholars, diplomats, and researchers accessed the deepest archives of the galaxy's knowledge. Trevor wasn't sure how, but he was convinced that if he could find something, anything, about Earth's culinary history or the biochemical effects of capsaicin on alien species. He could use it to prove that Triloc's collapse wasn't due to human food's primitive nature, but because of an alien species' inability to process it. When they reached the main terminal, Lena quickly logged in, her fingers flying across the console as she accessed files. "The galactic archives are extensive," she muttered, "but what exactly are we looking for? Biochemical breakdowns of food? Species-specific enzyme reactions?" "Yes, and we need something on capsaicin," Trevor said urgently, leaning over her shoulder. "Something that shows how this spice interacts with different species, biologies. Maybe a rare case of a species that can't tolerate the heat." Lena's eyes narrowed as she dug deeper. "There's no direct data on this in the public archives, but I did find some references. It's possible the rations haven't encountered a species like us before, a species that uses pain as part of its evolution." Trevor blinked. "Pain as evolution? You mean they don't understand what capsaicin does to us?" "Exactly," Lena said, turning to face him. "Humans have adapted to spicy foods over millennia. We use pain as a measure of survival. It's a chemical signal, one we can tolerate. But most species in the galaxy don't. To them, it's an unbearable toxin. They can't process it the way we do." Trevor nodded, absorbing her words. "So, if we can prove that this chili isn't toxic to humans but an adaptive trait, something that's built into us, they'll have to understand that it's a cultural thing. It's not primitive. It's survival." "That's the theory," Lena said, her fingers still typing quickly. "But we need more. We need proof. Something that shows other species have similar biochemical thresholds and just don't realize it." A few moments later, the screen flickered, and a new document appeared on the screen. It was a report hidden deep in the archives, one that had been declassified under the rarest of circumstances. It was a case study from the year 2105, on a human expedition to an uncharted world, where an alien species had encountered Earth's hot foods for the first time. The alien species, known as the Viren, tall, insectoid creatures, had reacted violently to capsaicin. Their nervous systems had been so overwhelmed by the heat that they collapsed into seizures, similar to Triloc's symptoms. But the report went further. It revealed that, after extensive medical intervention and research, the Viren had adapted. Slowly, their systems began to process the heat without the violent reaction. Their biochemistry had evolved, much like human had, to tolerate the spice. Trevor's breath caught in his throat. This was it, the key to everything. He pointed at the screen. "This is what we need to show them, proof that alien species can, in fact, adapt to capsaicin. It's not just us. Other species can do it too, but they need time. Trilok needs time to recover. We can't just let them condemn him because he doesn't have the right biochemical evolution yet." Lena raised an eyebrow, her mind already racing. "So, what's our next move?" "We need to present this case study to the council," Trevor said, his voice gaining strength. "We need to show them that their reactions are based on ignorance, not on reality. We can prove that this isn't an issue with human food. It's an issue with understanding food. If we get them to see that, we can change the narrative. We can get Trilok his chance to recover and maybe give humanity a foothold in the galaxy, one where we're not seen as primitive." Lena smiled, the first flicker of hope in her expression. "I'm with you. Let's do this." The council chambers were a sprawling, multi-tiered arena, constructed with smooth, polished surfaces that reflected the ambient light. The atmosphere buzzed with energy as delegates from across the galaxy filled the seats, their various species chatting in hushed tones. Each race had their own designated section, marked by symbols and colors that represented their civilizations. Humans, as a minority, had a small corner at the back, almost invisible among the other, more prominent species. But today was different. Today, Trevor Langford was about to stand before the council of the most powerful beings in the galaxy, armed with the knowledge he had just uncovered. The case study of the Viren and their adaptation to Earth's spicy foods had become his lifeline. This was more than just a defense of a single human chili. It was a statement, a chance for humanity to prove they were more than just a chaotic species struggling to survive. He felt the weight of that responsibility as he stepped up to the podium, his palms sweating despite his resolve. Beside him stood Lena, holding a data slate filled with the case study, ready to present it. Both of them had spent hours crafting the most compelling argument they could, a plea for the ration and other species to consider the long-term adaptation of food tolerance across species. The ration delegate who had first approached Trevor after Triloc's collapse was seated in the front row, his eyes cold and calculating. He would be the first to speak, Trevor knew. The ration had the most to lose here. After all, it was their leading xenobiologist who had collapsed in front of the entire symposium. Trevor cleared his throat. He had rehearsed his words 100 times in his head, but now that he stood before them, his mind swirled with doubt. But he couldn't afford to falter. Not now. He had to win them over, for Trilock, for humanity. Honorable Council members, delegates of the Galactic University, and esteemed guests, he began, his voice steady, though the words felt heavy on his tongue. I stand before you today not just to defend human food, but to speak to the heart of why we humans do what we do. We are a species forged in adversity, shaped by the challenges of survival, and yes, even in our food. We face discomfort, we face pain, and we use it to push us forward to test our limits and to build meaning. He paused, letting the weight of the moment sink in. A few delegates shifted uncomfortably, others watched with curiosity, but most seemed unmoved. I know, Trevor continued, that what you witnessed earlier with Triloc's collapse was unsettling. It's not something anyone expected, but it was not a failure of the human species. It was a failure of understanding. Human food, especially the Carolina Reaper, is not a weapon. It's an evolution, a part of who we are. And like any evolution, it requires time, it requires adaptation, and it can be learned. Lena stepped forward, activating a projector that illuminated the case study from the year 2105. The council watched as the hollow display materialized in front of them. A vivid image of the V-Ren, their insectoid forms trembling with the heat of capsaicin, their bodies racked with convulsions. This, Lena said, pointing to the display, is an example of how another species, similar to yours in many ways, encountered the very same challenge. The V-Ren could not process capsaicin, just as many of you cannot. But with time and with exposure, they adapted. Their bodies learned how to handle the chemical compound. They survived, and eventually they even began to tolerate it. The ration delegate shifted in his seat, clearly unsettled, but he said nothing. The rest of the council, however, leaned forward, intrigued. Trevor continued. What happened to Trilock was not failure, it was biology. He is not weak, he is not defective. He is simply an alien species encountering something that we humans have evolved to thrive on. But we did not always have that tolerance. It took centuries of exposure, and it's not just about the physical pain. It's about the culture, the identity that grows from it. He glanced at Trilock's still form, now visible through a large viewing window in the medical wing. Trilock's life was still hanging in the balance, but Trevor refused to let that stop him. This is not an isolated case. We can prove it. Other species have adapted, and so can you, but it takes time, it takes understanding, and it takes a willingness to embrace what others might call primitive. There was a long, pregnant pause. The ration delegate's eyes were fixed on the screen, his expression unreadable. A soft murmur of conversation rippled through the room as the council processed what Trevor had said. Some seemed intrigued, others skeptical. The tension was unbearable. And then, unexpectedly, the ration delegate stood. You present an interesting theory, human, he said, his voice cutting through the room like a blade. But this is not just about Trilock. This is about what happened to him. The council cannot simply overlook the fact that your species' food, your chili, was the direct cause of a galactic crisis. A near-death experience on the very first day of this symposium is not something we can take lightly. The council murmured in agreement, their voices growing louder. Trevor's heart sank. He had expected this. It wasn't going to be easy. But, the delegate continued, I believe your points have merit. This is not a failure of Earth, but a failure of interspecies understanding. We cannot punish an entire species for one individual's reaction. However, we need more than just theory. We need guarantees. We need proof that the rest of your species is capable of engaging with us without putting anyone in harm's way. Trevor swallowed, suddenly feeling the weight of the galaxy's judgment on his shoulders. He wasn't just defending Earth anymore. He was defending the very essence of human adaptability, their ability to push boundaries and challenge the impossible. I can prove it, Trevor said, his voice more confident now. We will demonstrate that we can safely interact with all of you without fear of harm, but we need your trust. We need you to give us the chance to show you that Earth and its people are not the reckless, barbaric species you think we are. The ration delegate studied him for a long moment, his black eyes narrowing as though weighing every word. And what do you propose, human? Trevor took a deep breath. A trial, a test. One that doesn't just involve capsaicin. We'll work with your scientists, your biochemists. We'll create a collaborative food experience, a chance for our species to demonstrate that we can adapt to one another, not just in biology but in culture. A ripple of murmurs ran through the council. This wasn't just about food anymore. It was about trust. It was about bridging the vast gulf of misunderstanding that separated Earth from the rest of the galaxy. The ration delegate's fronds twitched, and for the first time since he had entered the room, a small smile crept onto his lips. "I will propose this to the council," he said slowly. "If it is approved, we will work together. But understand this, if your species fails us again, there will be consequences. Do not make us regret this." Trevor nodded, his heart still racing but his resolve solidifying. "We won't fail you." The following days in the Galactic Culinary and Biological Institute passed in a blur. Trevor hardly slept, spending long hours in the library, cross-referencing every available archive and scientific report on alien species, biochemical reactions to Earth's food. He was determined to prove that Triloc's collapse was not the result of humanity's recklessness, but simply a failure of knowledge and adaptation. The ration delegate had proposed Trevor's plan to the council, and surprisingly it had been approved, though with heavy restrictions. The test would go ahead, but it would be closely monitored by a joint team of human and alien biologists, led by Triloc's own team. This was a huge win for humanity, but it was also a gamble. The entire galaxy would be watching, and one misstep could ruin everything. Triloc remained in the medical wing, still in critical condition but stabilized for the time being. Trevor visited him every day, trying to make sense of what had happened and how to move forward. Lena remained by his side, offering her expertise in xenobiology and food chemistry, helping Trevor organize the scientific data they would need to present during the trial. The pressure was mounting. Every conversation Trevor had with Lena or the ration delegates left him feeling more and more isolated. He knew what was at stake. This wasn't just a culinary experiment. It was a test of humanity's place in the galaxy. Would they be allowed to join the ranks of the great civilizations, or would they be dismissed as primitive and dangerous? On the third day after the council's approval, the day of the trial arrived. The atmosphere in the institute was electric with anticipation. Delegates from every corner of the galaxy filled the chambers, their eyes fixed on the stage. The ration delegate was seated in the front row, his stern gaze directed toward Trevor and Lena as they prepared for the trial. Triloc, though still in a recovery pod, was present through a hololink. His image flickered on the screen in the corner of the auditorium, his fronds moving weakly, his voice still hoarse but determined. "Human Langford," Triloc's voice crackled through the speakers. "I regret that I cannot be with you in person, but I will observe. For all our sakes, I hope you have not misunderstood the magnitude of this demonstration. Our futures, yours and ours, depend on what happens here today." Trevor swallowed, trying to ignore the fear settling in his chest. "I understand, Triloc," he said, though his voice sounded hollow even to him. "We won't fail you." The room fell silent as the test began. Lena stood beside Trevor at the podium, holding a tray of carefully prepared food. It was a delicate balance, a fusion of human spices and alien ingredients that had been specifically tailored to be palatable and safe for a variety of species. The challenge was clear: to show the council that Earth's food wasn't about pain or primitive survival tactics. It was about culture, identity, and shared experience. First, Lena explained the scientific process. "We have taken every precaution to ensure that no species is at risk," she began. "We have combined the flavors and spices of Earth with neutral ingredients from across the galaxy. This dish is designed to be both safe and intriguing, a test of how far our species can go in understanding each other's food cultures." The first dish was a delicate appetizer, spicy earth peppers combined with the mild, bitter herbs of the Viren species. The dish was engineered to test tolerance and adaptability. Trevor watched closely as the first delegate, a member of the crystalline Taurians, took a tentative bite. The Taurians' eyes widened for a moment as the spiciness of the peppers hit their tongue, but their biochemistry allowed them to handle it without issue. A murmur rippled through the council. Success. Next came a more complex dish, a combination of human chili and the sweet, tangy fruits of the Zelani species. The Zelani delegates took cautious bites, their bodies glowing faintly in the dim light of the auditorium. The chili's heat was tempered by the fruit, creating a complex, balanced flavor. One Zelani delegate smiled and nodded, acknowledging the unexpected harmony. It was working, but the true test was yet to come. Lena glanced at Trevor, her eyes filled with a mix of excitement and fear. "Are you ready?" she whispered. Trevor took a deep breath, "As ready as I'll ever be." The final dish was a challenge, both for the delegates and for Earth's food reputation. A modified version of the Carolina Reaper, paired with a rare fruit from the planet Kepler 442b, the fruit, which was known for its calming properties, would hopefully offset the intense heat of the pepper. The first to try it was a Ivran, a species of tall, slender beings with glowing green skin. Their biochemistry was unknown to Earth scientists, but it was clear that their internal systems could tolerate extremes of both heat and cold. As the Ivran delegate raised the fork to their mouth, Trevor held his breath. The Ivran took a bite. The second stretched long and heavy as the alien chewed, his expression unreadable. A ripple of tension spread through the room as the Ivran's face changed from calm to confusion. Then, without warning, the Ivran collapsed. The room exploded into chaos. Medics rushed to the delegate's side, but the damage was done. The council members scrambled to control the panic that had broken out, but it was clear the test had failed. Trevor's heart pounded in his chest as he watched the scene unfold in front of him. This was it. This was the moment that would define humanity's fate. "No, no," he whispered, his voice barely audible. Lena stepped back, her face pale with shock. "What went wrong?" she asked, her voice shaking. Triloc's voice crackled through the speaker again, this time more urgent. "What did you do, human Langford? This cannot be allowed to continue." Trevor's mind raced. He had followed every protocol, every suggestion. The peppers should have been safe. The fruit should have balanced out the heat, but something had gone wrong. And now, humanity's place in the galaxy hung in the balance. The room was chaotic. The sudden collapse of the Ivran delegate had sent the entire symposium into a state of panic. The council chamber buzzed with urgency as medics rushed forward, and the delicate diplomatic threads that had held the galaxy together were now fraying in real time. Triloc's hologram flickered nervously, his fronds twitching in agitation. "What have you done, Langford? This is a catastrophe. You've killed him." The Ivran delegate, lying on the floor, was surrounded by alien medics who were trying desperately to stabilize his system. The room had become an arena for medical experts, each species using their technology in an attempt to mitigate the damage caused by Earth's food. It felt like a nightmare, a sudden, unexpected disaster that Trevor could not have foreseen. Lena's face was pale. She clutched her data slate, her fingers trembling as she replayed the data on the ingredients. "It shouldn't have been that hot," she muttered. "There must be something." "Shut it down," a ration delegate shouted, standing up abruptly. "This is beyond a test. You have crossed the line." Trevor felt the weight of every eye in the room on him. The eyes of 1,000 species, all watching as the fate of humanity was decided in this one moment. He could hear the whispers around him, the judgment, the condemnation building with each passing second. Triloc's image flickered once more. "You failed, human. This is no longer about food. This is about survival. The Ivran is one of the oldest species in the galaxy. What you have done is unforgivable." Trevor swallowed hard. His head was spinning, his heart racing. He thought of all the research, all the hours spent crafting the perfect argument, the hope he'd felt when they'd begun the trial. Now it all felt like a cruel joke. One mistake, one wrong decision, and humanity was at risk of being exiled from the very galaxy they'd hoped to be part of. He turned to Lena, his voice tight with desperation. "We need to help him. We need to prove it wasn't our fault. The Ivran delegate, I mean, it was an isolated reaction. We need to show the council that this is just a biological anomaly." Lena looked back at him, her face conflicted. "How, Trevor? How can we fix this now? We don't have time. They'll never trust us again." Trevor gripped the edge of the podium, his mind spinning. He couldn't let this be the end. Not now. Not when they were so close to proving humanity's worth. But what could he do? The council's judgment was swift and unforgiving. Every second was another step toward an irreversible collapse of everything they had worked for. And then a voice cut through the chaos. "I'll take responsibility." Trevor looked up, his eyes widening in disbelief as the Ivran delegate, now stabilized, sat up slowly on the medical table. The alien's skin shimmered with the residual heat of the capsaicin, but the convulsions had stopped, and he seemed calm. The council fell silent as the Ivran delegate, still groggy but composed, raised one hand in the air. "It was not the human's fault," he said, his voice surprisingly steady for one who had just collapsed. His eyes met Trevor's, and the sincerity in them was unmistakable. "I did not react properly to the food. My species has a history of extreme sensitivity to certain compounds, and we've never encountered such intensity in food. It is not a failure of the humans. It is a failure of my biology to adapt in real time." The room was still. The council members, their faces filled with confusion and disbelief, looked to one another, unsure how to proceed. Trilok, still connected via the hololink, was silent for a moment before speaking again. "Are you certain, Ivran delegate, you're willing to say this? This catastrophe was a result of your own biology?" The Ivran delegate nodded slowly. "Yes, and I'm willing to undergo further tests if necessary to prove it. But I stand by my statement. The humans did not act recklessly. It was my own body that failed to respond appropriately, not theirs." Trevor could barely believe it. The Ivran, who had just been on the verge of death moments ago, was taking the blame for the incident. He glanced at Lena, who was just as stunned. "We need to act fast," Trevor said, his voice hoarse but resolute. "The Council will only accept this if we can prove that this is a biological anomaly and not a pattern with Earth's food." Lena quickly activated the data slate, accessing the archive that contained the biochemical data on the Ivran and other species' reactions to spicy compounds. She found a report detailing similar reactions in other species with extreme sensitivity to certain compounds. "Here," she said, pointing to the display. "This is it. Species with highly sensitive neurochemical pathways. It's a phenomenon that we've seen in only a few instances, and it mirrors the Ivran delegate's reaction." Trevor took a deep breath. "We have it," he said, standing taller now. "This is proof. We can show the Council that this was not a failure of human food, but an isolated reaction due to biological sensitivity." Lena nodded. "We need to present this immediately." The Council members were still in shock, their expressions ranging from skepticism to disbelief. But Trevor knew they were listening. The Ivran delegate's acceptance of responsibility had shifted the momentum of the trial. The humans hadn't failed. They were being tested, just like every other species in the galaxy, and they had survived. Trevor walked to the front of the room, pulling up the display on the main screen. "Honorable Council members," he began, his voice gaining strength. "This was not a failure of Earth's food. This was a biological anomaly, a reaction of an individual species' extreme sensitivity. We have the data to prove it, and we offer it in the spirit of cooperation and understanding. We are willing to work with you to learn from each other and to adapt just as we always have." He paused for a moment, letting the silence stretch out. "We ask you, as members of the galactic community, to judge us not by one mistake, but by the intent behind our actions. We are not a species of recklessness. We are a species of resilience." There was a long pause. The ration delegate stood up slowly, his eyes focused on Trevor. "Your case is compelling," he said, his voice low but thoughtful. "Perhaps we have underestimated you, human. We will not rush to judgment, but we will allow this test to continue." The Council members murmured among themselves, their voices growing more animated. The tide was shifting, and for the first time, Trevor felt a spark of hope. "We accept your challenge, human," the ration delegate continued, his fronds swaying in agreement. "But understand this, you must prove that this is not an isolated incident. Prove that Earth can adapt to the galactic standard, and we will welcome you." The room went quiet, and then, slowly as if they had been holding their breath, the Council began to applaud. It wasn't a resounding ovation, but it was enough. The trial was not over, but Trevor had won the most important battle. Humanity had a place in the galaxy, and they would prove without a shadow of a doubt that their resilience, their creativity, and their ability to adapt were their greatest strengths. Trilok's hologram flickered once more. Perhaps you are right, human Langford," he said quietly. "Perhaps there is more to Earth than we thought." Trevor looked up, a smile breaking through the tension. "We'll show you," he said, his voice steady and full of conviction. "We'll show you what humans are capable of."